non-existence. God, this boss is the coolest boss ever in the fucking history of ARPG gaming. Woo!
Something.
Yo, what's up guys? Catmaster here with another video. Quick update on the League starter Armageddon Brand Ignite Elementalist, because we did level it to level 93. As you saw in the intro, I did Awakener at Awakener level 8. It was Deathless and it was without logging out, so pretty solid build for bossing, even though the fight itself, I have to admit, took in total about 13-14 minutes because the damage is not the best. But that's one of the points that I have written down, and we'll just run a map and I'll quickly go over, my realizations with the build so far. So this is beyond turbo, nothing super crazy. 70% chance to avoid elemental ailments though, so that will be pretty bad. No, wait, we can't run that. So that's the first thing that I want to talk about, I guess, is that the build is fairly sensitive to certain map mods. There's a new map mod that is called Cannot Inflict Exposure. That's pretty bad for the build because exposure is like one of the biggest debuffs on enemies that increase my damage. And stuff like elemental resistances, a double life on the boss, or endurance charges, which effectively are also resistances, are not really that easy, especially in tier 14 plus. You will notice that the single target does suffer. But that said, I want to go ahead and say this build has pretty good clear thanks to elemental proliferation. The strongest ignite that you apply to a monster in the pack will always proliferate through the entire pack, right? So that's good. And despite the relatively low DPS of, I think my PoE says without convergence up, it's currently like 300k ignite DPS if there's exposure on the enemy. Which is not a lot, right? But despite the relatively low DPS, the build feels capable of doing most things simply because you have a really good consistent damage uptime. What do I mean by that? What I mean is you don't need to stand still to actually apply your damage like you'd have to do in a hitting build most of the times, right? If you're using like a attacker or spellcaster, that will require you to stand still to deliver your maximum DPS output, where this build, you just come in, you apply your brand, you apply your exposure, and then you can walk around and avoid the boss damage for most of the time. And that, I think, makes up for the fact that boss fights take a little bit longer. This is a tier 15 map boss, so honestly I think it's not that bad. That said, I do have a 6-link and I have the replica Ember Wake, and my gems are leveled. I already have 2 awakened damage gems, which I didn't have for the Sirus, but yeah. It is fairly geared within the possibilities of this build. That said, though, the build is really cheap and affordable. If you don't factor in the 6-link, which you can easily get if you corrupt things, you can use the tainted fusings. I'm sure you can find videos on that. Like, a lot of people have been really lucky with getting 6-links this league with the tainted fusing orbs. I'd say everything altogether is around, like, not even 5 exalts, I want to say. I haven't checked the prices recently, obviously. That's just the money that I pay, right? Like, Replica Ember Wake was like 1.5x at the time I bought it. Martyr of Innocence was like 1.3. Creation's Chitin only was like 6 or so. The gloves were worth like 20-30 C. All in all, it's a very budget build, and it's pretty affordable. Despite the fact that I call it decent clear, you have to say that the movement speed is really on the low end for an endgame build in Path of Exile. Like, the mobility, especially for like softcore, where you kind of want to just cruise through things and kill things really fast, doesn't really hold up to the expectations of many players. Yeah, I mean, have to keep in mind that the expectations of many players are warped by showcases of builds that are just insane glass cannons or really, really high invested builds from top-end players. So keep that in mind when you compare it to some other builds. This is a really, really cheap setup. But the low movement speed is sort of a turn off for many people, even for myself. It's been mentioned on stream a couple of times. Then that said, you also have low mitigation outside of block. Yes, I am block capped with my crab barriers up, and the build does feel really good against single targets. But if you're in like a big pack, you can get bursted down really easily. It happens because the block is only at 77% when I have my crab barriers up. But the moment that I take damage from a physical hit, as in I don't block, like the 23% of hits that I don't block, and I take physical damage from one of the hits, then the crab barriers are gone, and that removes 8% of the block, so I'll be back down to 69% of block, so subsequent hits in the next 2 or 3 seconds before the crab barriers are back up will be more likely to not be blocked, and you can get bursted down, especially in the fairly rippy, infinitely scaling Scourge content from this league, right? The Scourge is insanely rippy. As you can see, one wrong position, one unlucky block, and you can die. Although that was sort of, because I'm talking and not paying attention. Obviously, you shouldn't walk into the middle of the pack, especially if you're playing a build like that is not meant to be in the middle of the action, but it's just sort of, you just throw down things and watch things die. So that death was completely unnecessary. And another thing that's really great about the brand playstyle that I want to highlight is the fact that you can actually put down your brands for damage before monsters spawn and then go to a safe distance and just wait for things to die. So yeah, upsides and downsides, but like I said, relatively low mitigation outside of block. I do have the physical damage reduction from the endurance charges, which is 12%. You get 20% phys reduction from aspect of the crab. So when those two things are up, it's 32% physical damage reduction on top of whatever you get from your armor. Armor is pretty low though, unless you're gearing around it, even with the granite flask up. I don't have an iron skin right now, so maybe I should run an iron skin. You can also, if you choose to, you can give up anger and run determination instead. Both are 50% auras, so that's really, really doable. And yeah, you have a fairly small HP pool at this level, right? Because we're wearing so many uniques that don't have life. Creation's Chitin has only increased life, no flat life. Stone of Lazwa, no flat life. Replica Emberwake, no flat life. Rainbow Strike, no flat life. Martyr obviously is a staff that uses both hand slots, so you also missing out on the shield slot, which could have flat life. The belt could have more life. Could be not a strength belt, but we need the strength, so either it needs to be on the implicit or it needs to be a heavy belt. But all I'm saying is, like, overall, the HP pool is really, really small. Like, when a hit comes through and it's bigger than 6k, then it will likely kill you. Even if you have all the phys mitigation up, I think you can be only hit for like a 7-something k physical hit, and it will kill you. So you have to be aware of that, right? And you don't have a whole lot of passive recovery in this current state of the build. In the original PoB that I pitched, I was running a level 20 Vitality. I had the 2% Regen Mastery while moving, and I had some other regen from somewhere that I don't remember right now, but all in all, I had like 400, 500 regen. That's not the case in this current state of the build because of how the things came together. I only have 120 life regeneration per second, so that feels really bad. Sure, you have the emergency button, Enduring Cry, so you can quickly recover like 1500 life over the course of a second. And that's something that's going to get fixed on the way to level 97-ish. There are some things that I want to adjust. We can fit in an Enlighten into the aura setup, so we can bump up the Vitality to level 20, or if we hit the Corrupt level 21. And last but not least, one thing I want to mention is a very, very tight mana budget. I went ahead and put Arcane Surge back on just so that the mana sustain is enough. You do not need to cast, like, you don't need to spam Armageddon Brand. You know, you put one down, you put one down here, you put one down there. In a boss fight, you put down Arcanists and Armageddon Brand every couple of seconds, like say every 4 or 5 seconds. I think overall the attached duration of both brands is like 6 seconds. So don't need to really cast a whole lot of times. I don't really run into a lot of issues with the mana limitations. But if you're not aware of that and you're playing a rather spammy playstyle, you can very, very quickly hit the limitations of the mana pool. And that's something we need to account for by getting this mana mastery, for example. And it's something that you'll have to keep in mind when building this character. So we already mentioned a couple of those, but the next section I want to talk about is changes that I made since the start of the build, like changes that I made to the original plan that I pitched in my League Starter video. I do keep updating the POB under the video, so that after this video is released, I'll put the current POB and the future plan in there as well, so you only can see the original plan in the video, because I'll replace all the old, outdated POBs. But changes that I made since then include the Arcanist Brand setup. So Arcanist Brand is casting Anomalous Flame Surge for me, and Flammability. This I'm going to go into in a second. Arcane Surge I put onto the Arcanist's Brand because I need the mana regen from Arcane Surge. You can see when I throw that out, my mana regen goes from 50 something to 70 something, and that really helps the build feel able to do things, especially in spammy situations. As you can see, sometimes the skills get grayed out because I can't use them anymore because I don't have the mana for them. But all in all, it's workable. I don't feel like I've died before because I ran out of mana, although that can happen, like I said, if you're not aware of that and you're not playing around with that. Arcanist Brand casts the Flame Surge for single target and the Flammability. Later on, I'm going to get a curse on hit ring for the Flammability, and I'm going to manually curse Elemental Weakness when I get an additional curse, but we're going to go into the plans for the future of the build in just a second. Just quickly want to go over the changes. Anomalous Flame Surge is the alternate quality, or one of the alternate quality gems for Flame Surge. This one on top of the Burning Ground that deals a percentage of the ignite damage on the enemy will have a 0.5% chance to scorch enemies per quality. So at 20% quality, you have a 10% chance to scorch enemies. Scorched enemies have their elemental resistances lowered by up to 30% based on the fire damage of the hit. Scorch is an alternative fire ailment, so this is not affected by Anomalous Flame Surge or Flame Surge in general not being able to ignite, because ignite it's a different ailment. Flame Surge can still scorch. And it hits quite hard, even without support gems. So the Scorch is on the enemy, not at a maximum value of 30%, but it does here and there increase the damage taken from the enemy by lowering the resistances further. It's definitely worth putting on. Later on, we're going to make sure that Flame Surge is the only thing on the Arcanist Brand, because currently Arcanist Brand is alternating between the Curse and the Flame Surge, so there's only half the cast frequency to Flame Surge, and that means on fast-moving enemies, the enemies will not always be on the Burning Ground, 1, and 2, that they will not always be scorched, because Flame Surge has a roll range, and all the added damage has a roll range, so like sometimes you get a really good scorch on the enemy, sometimes not so much. Similar to the ignites on the Armor Brand. Another thing that I've already touched upon is for a long time I was running Determination instead of Anger, and this works really, really well for clearing content, because a lot of the hits that you're taking in maps are much smaller than in boss fights. So the armor that you get from Determination is really worth a lot, and that combined with the fact that my anger is actually not worth that much in this build, because as you can see, it's really nice. Everything dies, you just keep running away and avoiding the enemies. But anger is not worth that much in this build. Anger provides a large amount of flat fire damage to spells, so also to Armageddon Brand, but that is not as impactful in a build like mine that uses Martyr of Innocence, because Martyr of Innocence grants, I would say, roughly 3 times as much flat damage than Anger does at level 19 right now. Yeah, like roughly 3 times as much. So it pales in comparison, right? It's still a meaningful boost to the overall damage, but it's not that bad to sacrifice it for determination. And later, when the damage is a little bit better, I can still reasonably expect to double the damage with moderate to high investment. Then we're not going to be running Anger for clear situations in tier 14s or 16s anymore. It's just right now, I think it's a good boost that helps things die faster or helps me kill things faster. But later on, we'll only be running that in boss situations, right? I think in a boss situation, most of the times you don't care about the determination, because if you're going to get hit, you can't tank one shot or big slams anyway, right? No matter whether you're running Anger or determination. So the plan is to run Anger for maximum damage output in those bossing situations, and in mapping situations we don't care about maximum damage output because the damage is going to be more than enough, so we want to run the determination. I dropped the Brand Mastery. Right. This has been moved from Holy Conquest on Cluster Jewels to the Brand Mastery. And when I say this, I mean the line, brands attach to a new enemy each time they activate, no more than once every 0.3 seconds. And that I thought was crucial, but turns out this is only important for other brands. For this one, not so much, because the proliferation. You don't need the brand to go through the pack, because you ignite one monster and everything around the monster will be affected by the proliferation of the ignite. So I took this out and saved the point and put it somewhere else. On top of that, I also gave up the damage over time mastery, right? This one is 10% damage over time multiplier if you've killed recently. Early on, that is a really, really good boost to the clear. But now, when we already scaled a lot of dot multiplier, it's less of a more multiplier to the build, and also it is only up if you've killed recently, so it doesn't help you against single targets. And like I already said, single targets are the biggest struggle for the build. The clear is actually really, really nice. So we also dropped this one for another point, and we got another jewel socket in the build. So currently running 3 jewel sockets. This one, and this one. I made sure all of them have increased life and the fire damage over time multiplier, which rolls up to 8% now. You can roll this on top of a regular damage over time multiplier for 6%, for a total of 14% dot multi. That's the reason why this one is not so efficient. You can get a lot of dot multi right now. And these ones are also used to complement the spell block and the attack block, right? This is to attack block here. And that brings me up to the 77%. I'm getting a 2% extra max chance to block attack damage from the block mastery, which is another change. Originally, I had intended to get the flat life and flat mana gain on block, but I felt like that was unimpactful, and I felt really silly for not taking the max chance to block attack damage, because it's really, really easy to go to 77%. 1% of the jewels I don't really need, like one I could replace with a regular one if my Martyr of Innocence was perfectly rolled, because this one is only 15 out of the possible 16 chance to block attack damage while wielding a staff. So we're gonna get another Martyr of Innocence and 6-link it and try to corrupt it with the lead mechanic and get good mods. Luckily, we don't need to double corrupt or single corrupt it with Valing, because we're not interested in any implicit modifiers, because then you lose the natural 18% chance to block attack damage while wielding a staff on the Highborn staff base. So not really something that I would recommend. Although if you're looking for maximum damage, you could certainly go for a double corrupt on the Martyr. You'd just not be attack block capped as easily. Okay, we're already transitioning into big improvements, so I'm going to quickly show you the POB. So this is the path of building. Oh, by the way, guys, if you enjoy this sort of content, if you like the build and stuff like that, make sure, of course, to subscribe. Where's the button? Here. There. Just a quick reminder, subscriptions help the channel grow and help me to make more content like this, if that's anything that you're interested in. But this is the POB of the build as I killed Sirus, right? This is roughly 322 Ignite DPS. This is factoring in exposure fire, right? Because that is a huge part of the damage. But you apply that with your Wave of Conviction and it's pretty much guaranteed to be up. I took the Wave of Conviction off of the Arcanist brand, which I had that there, but I felt like it's better if you manually cast it. It's really huge while you don't have Convergence, because Elementalist gets 60% increased AoE. And it's really nice and easy to apply, especially because, like I said, the build has good damage uptime with you just running around. You just need to cast the brands every couple of seconds, so in between you can always make sure that that exposure is still on the enemy, so I feel absolutely confident that that is always up, right? And it's also factoring in 2 brands attached to the enemy, and it's boss DPS, just checking for sure. So 322 Ignite DPS, and that's at level 93 with Illyra, and I theory crafted out that with reasonable investment, you can still min-max it hard to get close to 800k DPS. And then, of course, you also have to kind of factor in Convergence, right? Convergence is 50% of the time you have 30% more elemental damage. So I'd say overall it's like 15% more elemental damage. So, yeah. I mean, if you switch it on, you go to 1 million. If you switch it off, you're at 800k, roughly. So I'd say 900k Ignite DPS is fair to say. And I think that's going to feel really good, because that's almost... I mean, it's just shy of 3 times as much damage as I have in the current state of the build. And like I said, the Awakener level 8 Sirus took 13 minutes with 3 times as much damage, or almost 3 times as much damage. I'd say we'd go down to, like, I don't know, like between a 4 and 5 minute kill, and that would be really solid, I think. And I'm quickly going to go over the changes that I made to the build in between the previous state that I showed you and this state at level 97. And I'm going to talk about a little bit of the challenges that we have there. So I'm going to bring up the thing here, the notepad. Big improvements. Additional curse elemental weakness. So as you may know, we're running Stone of Lazar, which is a relatively cheap amulet, low level unique, and you can buy a lot of them and hope to corrupt them for an additional curse. That's not a problem, because there is a tainted oil in the game which allows you to apply anoints to corrupted amulets, so you don't need to put the expensive Searing Heat anoint on there before corrupting, but you can just corrupt a whole bunch of them, and then when you hit a good one, you can actually just anoint it afterwards. Now, we're not going to use catalysts to quality them up, and I already prepared a full tab that I'm going to corrupt tomorrow on stream. These are all Stones of Lazar with 15% spell block. I didn't care about the other stats because the intelligence doesn't matter. The cast speed is nice quality of life, but ultimately I couldn't go through with like just having 15% cast speed, because it would have taken ages to fill up this tab. But this is 12 by 12, 144 Stones of Lazar. I actually got a 145th here that I got from a guildmate. And one thing I wanted to say about that, exactly, they need to be item level 60 at least in order to be able to hit the corrupt of you can apply 1 additional curse. So keep that in mind if you want to do the same thing. I made a terrible mistake and I bought these all, which are all lower than item level 60, so rough. I figured it out later on stream with the help of a regular who actually drew my attention to that fact. And I was like, oh shit, I'm so stupid, I didn't think about that. Anyway, so yeah, you can easily corrupt them, get an additional curse. If you get elemental weakness into the build, that's another so and so many % resist reduction on bosses, and that makes for a much higher total DPS. Searing Heat Anoint is the anoint that we're going for instead of the Arsonist. Arsonist is kind of the budget version with double verdant azure oil. And we're going to path there instead of anointing it because it's really close and we need the strength anyway for Calm's Heart. And anoint Searing Heat. Searing Heat, as ignites, you inflict deal damage 15% faster. That ignites deal damage faster, stacks additively with itself, so it stacks with the up to 45% increased from, or up to 45% faster from Replica Emberwake. And that's not only a more multiplier because it raises your DPS by that factor, but it also reduces your ignite duration, which is something you need to keep in mind because Replica Emberwake also already reduces ignite duration, right? It's actually ignites you inflict deal damage faster is a less multiplier to the duration and stacks multiplicatively with reduced ignite duration. Reduced ignite duration stacks additively with increased ignite duration, which is why we're picking up one node here of the ignite duration. And in the calculations, you can see that my ignites last exactly 0.63 seconds on this. And my hit rate with the Armageddon brand is 1.69. So that means, right, 1 second divided by 1.69 hits per second. That means every 0.59 seconds I apply an ignite, and each ignite lasts 0.63 seconds, so there is no gap in between the ignites. That's something you have to make sure of, because if you didn't have this ignite duration up here, then the ignites would only last 0.25 seconds, and that would not be enough. Then half of the time the enemy would not be ignited. So you definitely need one of them. Currently I have two because it helps the clear when your damage is low, but I think at the point where you reach 800k ignite DPS with exposure, I don't think you need this one anymore, and then you can put that point somewhere else. Just something you keep in mind. That's like one of the crucial things in the build is you reduce your ignite duration so much that you need to increase it a little bit to have seamless ignites basically. But Searing Heat, really good anoint. It's going to be a lot of damage and you save a lot of points pathing there. You do kind of miss out on another 5% faster, but it's not all that great, the stat, because you already have a lot of faster. And then a Curse on Hit Ring will obviously help that, because we can't easily apply 2 curses without the Curse on Hit Ring. So we're going to have an Unset Ring, which has flammability on hit. Why Unset? Because we're short on sockets with Calm's Heart. And it also needs to take care of the strength requirement, or at least part of the strength requirement, which is great because that helps the life, right? Strength doubles his life. Every 2 strength you have on your build is 1 flat life. So this ring actually has not only 69 life, which is a tier 2 roll. I'm not expecting to get a tier 1 roll, but you could have a tier 1 roll on top of that. But if you have this, then it's actually 94 flat life on the ring, factoring in the life you get from the strength. Another huge thing for the damage is, instead of the current gloves that I'm using, you could craft apothecary gloves with fire dot multi on a hunter base. You can roll up to 20% if we're talking about, I think that's the elevated mod though. I think that's a little bit, no, that's actually, yeah, up to 20 on the regular mod, and if you elevate it, it could go up to 25. But let's just assume we're not elevating it. That's something that is, next level, and we're not quite at that point yet, right? Like, this is already pretty godlike gear, right? Divine the Emberwake rolls. My current Emberwake only has 39% faster. So you could still min-max that to 45% faster. And then Awakened Gems, I switched that already in my current build because they were not really that expensive, but Awakened Deadly Ailments is just a lot better than the regular Deadly Ailments. I think by, it's like a, whatever, let's see, Deadly Ailments, regular Deadly Ailments at level 20 has 44% more damage with Ailments. Awakened Deadly Ailments at level 5 has 55%, right? Oh no, 54. And most importantly, Awakened Burning Damage, actually at level 5, which is the max level for Awakened Gems, you could still corrupt it to 6, but at level 5, this gets +1 level of supported fire skill gems, so this will bump up the Armageddon brand level by 1, and give you a bunch of flat damage from the gems still. Maxing out gems in general is a big factor, obviously. You can get the Armageddon brand to 21 by corrupting it. I think the other gems, I think Inspiration doesn't matter between level 20 and 21, doesn't give you more damage because it's more elemental damage per Inspiration charge. If you got this to 25, I think then it would get 6% more elemental damage per inspiration charge instead of 5. But you're not realistically getting it to 25. I wouldn't know how anyway. I guess with enhance, but then you'd be sacrificing a link. Just for the sake of mentioning it, right, for completion. So awakened gems and maxing out gems is a big factor with anger. I'm quickly taking off anger to see how much damage it is. You know, that's from 700k to 790k. So you could definitely sacrifice that anger for determination, at the very least for clearing maps, and that will make your survivability in the Scourge stuff a lot better. And obviously you need an Enlighten in your aura setup, like here, because that will allow you to bump up the vitality level without reserving too much of your mana. You'll still have like 100 unreserved mana, that should be enough with a level 3 Enlighten. But if you don't have an Enlighten, like I said, then you just run a low level vitality like I'm currently doing, and you'll have the same thing, but you'll sacrifice a lot of the life regen, and I think life regen is good to have. I'm saying a lot. Need to train on that. Helmet enchant. Right. We can enchant the helmet. Armageddon Brand deals 40% increased damage. This also applies to the Ignites by Armageddon Brand. This applies to all its damage, right? And that's a big factor, I think. I don't know how much, but it's noticeable. Should we check? I'm quickly checking. I don't want the video to be too long. That's why I'm talking so much and fast. But take this off and save. Yeah, see, that's like from 790 to 749. So that's not as big a factor, but it is a factor for sure. And that's definitely something that you should easily be able to get if you run a couple of labs. Who am I kidding? It's really RNG. You may get it, you may not get it. I mean, you could run 100 labs without ever seeing the enchant. But it's something that I'm going to try to get on Creation's Chitin, especially because I could double corrupt the Creation's Chitin and Scourge it, and when it's corrupted, there's a new item in the game, currency item called Tainted Blessing. Tainted Blessing PoE. And Tainted Blessing is a currency item that you can pop into the Divine Font, and that allows you to enchant corrupted gloves, boots, helmets, or belts. Right? Belts for the Uber labs, but so that means you don't need to have the enchant on the helmet before you corrupt it, before you scourge it, before you do whatever adds the corrupted tag to it. So it's really a blessing. Another thing that I did in this build is I gave up the CB immunity from this, freeing up a passive point, and instead rely on CB immunity on a jewel corrupt. Also very RNG. I mean, you could corrupt 100 jewels without ever seeing corrupted blood cannot be inflicted on you, but you could also be lucky and get it on the first one. And if you get it, that frees up a passive point because you'd be running the jewel anyway if it's a good jewel. And then you don't need to pick it here. You could then go here, and if you have still some resist problems, go with the all res, right? Or you could just not get anything. You could get cannot be maimed or hindered. Could get reduced effective curses, whatever you please. Or you could also just not have it and like invest the points elsewhere. And yeah, that about sums it up. I probably missed like one or two little things that I did to get the damage this high. I definitely didn't mention the corrupt for increased damage on the Calm's Heart. Obviously, this double corrupt is kind of a dream on the Calm's Heart. I've been bricking Calm's Hearts already since the start of the league. I think I bricked in total 3. One turned into an Elder Six link, one turned into a Warlords without link, and one just poofed and was gone. So they're not really that expensive. I mean, Calm's Hearts, I bought them at like between 25 and 35 chaos, depending on the fire damage roll. And the corruption chambers are really easy to farm if you just invest into Alva and Glenak Cairns. Then you get to make really, really juicy temples.
History repeats
and
itself.
it's not really that hard to hit tier 3 rooms. You just have to be lucky that it's actually a corruption chamber. But that's something that we're going to be working on, and that I hope to get. And yeah, if I forgot to mention something, let me know in the comments down below. But I think this build is fairly good for the amount of time and currency that I invested into it, and we can still get it to more than twice as much damage and get the survivability up a fair bit and I think then it will feel really good even for tier 14 plus Scourge content. Resists and attributes are going to be very tight. As you can see, I barely have enough strength to use the Calm's Heart. This like 191 is exactly what you need for Calm's Heart, and the Dexterity 79 is also exactly what I need for my Dexterity support gems for the which one is it? Awakened Deadly Ailments requires 79 dex at this level. So if I get it to level 6 by corrupting it, I'll actually have a problem because I'll be missing 2 dexterity. So yeah, not sure how to solve that. You could have a better belt than the one I projected here. Yeah, that this one would be a lot more life. You get to 6k life if you run a Hunter Stygian Vise with like life and increased life and strength. But I felt like this one is a little bit too good to expect to reasonably get that within the next week, which is about the time that I still want to play this build before indulging in another project. So yeah, resists and attributes are going to be very, very tight. I'm going to be very hard to meet the attribute requirements and to get the resists to the point where I'm capped. But keep in mind, you'll always have endurance charges up. That's 4% resist per endurance charge, so that also helps being capped. Now, this video is already very long. I don't want to talk much longer, but I hope you liked the video. Again, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet for more content like this. Where's the button? There. And yeah, the corruption video, the corrupting a full stash tab of Stones of Lazar, that's going to come tomorrow. And I hope that I hit at least 1+1 curse. That would be very awesome. And that would be a big upgrade to the build already now. Like just putting elemental weakness into the build is such a huge boost. Okay, switch it off. See the damage goes from 690 to 790, so that's definitely more than 15% more, I'd say. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. Also, thanks to all the people who support me on the channel, who keep renewing their subscriptions on twitch.tv/CatmasterOP, and of course the people who support me on Patreon. You make it possible that I deliver this content, and I'll see you in the next one.